close attention, and I want you to understand that I don't necessarily subscribe to everything that you're going to hear tonight as my personal beliefs. I'm just going to tell you the message in the Lion King. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. But the people who are bringing about the New World Order believe it, I can assure you. The opposing forces engaged in this battle all agree that they will have a one world government. The only point of contention is which one of these opposing forces will sit upon the throne of the world. One believes that they are protecting and will hold forth a king, descended from the house of David and thus related directly by blood to Jesus Christ. He will hold the titles of the King of Jerusalem and Holy Roman Emperor. He will be a direct descendant of the Merovingian bloodline of the kings of France. One of the others is to believe to be the direct bloodline descendants of Cain. And they plan to seat their king upon the throne of the world. And then, of course, there is the Vatican, which I guarantee you will be one or the other of the first two when all the dust has settled.
This compromise between paganism and Christianity resulted in the development of the man of sin foretold in prophecy as opposing and exalting himself above God. The Apostle Paul, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, foretold the great apostasy. Quote, "That day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Unquote. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4, and that prophecy has come true. As man stands in the temple of the body today and declares himself to be God. And furthermore, the apostle warned his brethren that the mystery of iniquity doth already work. And what is the mystery of iniquity? It is the mystery religion of Babylon, the worship of the heavens, the Osirian cycle, of which the sun is the symbol of the intellect. Even at that early date, he saw creeping into the church errors that would prepare the way for the development of that gigantic system of false religion, a masterpiece of Satan's power, a monument of his efforts to seat himself upon the throne and rule the earth according to his will. The nominal conversion of the Roman Emperor Constantine in the early part of the 4th century caused great rejoicing, and the world, cloaked with a form of righteousness, walked into the church. Paganism, while appearing to be vanquished, became the conqueror. Pagan doctrines, ceremonies, and superstitions were incorporated into the faith and worship of the professed followers of Christ. And the 10 Commandments were changed to permit idols in the church. And other changes were made. You see, the day of rest was changed from the 7th day to the 1st day. Why? Because the 1st day was the date that the pagan religion worshipped the sun, Osiris, the light, Lucifer, the intellect. And so the pure and simple teachings of Christ were corrupted beyond recognition. As Christians consented to lower their standards, a union was formed between Christianity and paganism. Though the worshippers of idols professed to be converted, they united with the church, still clinging to their idolatry, only changing the objects of their worship to images of Jesus and even of Mary and the saints. But they still worshipped the same gods. And they always have. If you look at an aerial view of the Vatican, you will see that the outer courtyard is a round temple of the sun, exactly as the Druids and the Celts built, and that in the center of this temple to the sun, to Osiris, stands the symbol of the lost word of Freemasonry, the phallus, the generative force, the penis of Osiris, the obelisk. You see, folks, the Roman Empire never fell. It just became the Catholic Church. And the Roman emperor merely changed his name from emperor to pope. Full absolution was offered to any pilgrim who would come to Rome for 15 days with his offering for the church, and thus he could fill his coffers. Even at his most optimistic, the Pope had not foreseen the flood of pilgrims that would bring new prosperity to Rome. The local merchants and innkeepers were delighted with the business generated by almost 2 million pilgrims. 2 priests stood all day and night behind the altar at the Church of St. Paul, using rakes to drag away the steady stream of gold and silver offerings placed there by pilgrims who pushed their way through the mob to leave their gifts. Boniface VIII was ecstatic. He remembered the words said to him as the papal crown had been placed on his head. Quote, "Take the tiara and know that thou art the father of princes and kings, the ruler of the world, the vicar on earth of our Savior Jesus Christ." Unquote. Now he indeed felt like the ruler of the world as he staged a regal pageant. He put on the dress and the insignia of the ancient Roman emperors and went out into the streets with 2 swords held high in front of him, indicating his supreme authority over both the secular and the spiritual worlds, with heralds crying out, quote, "Behold, I am Caesar," unquote. And this is just one example, because all through history the popes have, on occasion, made public admittance of the fact that Rome just became the church. Displayed on the walls of the Vatican is the double-headed eagle, the insignia of only one man who has ever lived, the Emperor of Rome. Faith was transferred from Christ, the true foundation of the Christian church, to the Pope of Rome. Instead of trusting in Christ for forgiveness of sins and for eternal salvation, people looked to the Pope and to the priests and prelates to whom he delegated authority. They were taught that the Pope was their earthly mediator, and that none could approach God except through him, and further, that he stood in the place of God to them, and was therefore to be implicitly obeyed. A deviation from his requirements was cause for the severest punishment to be visited upon the bodies and souls of the offenders. Through this error the people were turned from God to fallible, erring men. Blasphemous titles claimed for the Pope have been embellished and enlarged over the centuries, but a few of these boastful claims appear in an ecclesiastical Roman Catholic dictionary. I'm taking this right out of a Roman Catholic dictionary by Lucius Ferraris, entitled Prompta Bibliotheca Canonica, Volume 6, pages 438, 442, article Pope, the Catholic Encyclopedia 1913 edition. Volume 6, page 48, speaks of this book as a veritable encyclopedia of religious knowledge and a precious mine of information. Those are the words of the Vatican. Quote, "The Pope is of so great dignity and so exalted that he is not a mere man, but as it were God and the vicar of God." Unquote. Remember, the Roman emperors were deified. Quote, hence the Pope is crowned with a triple crown as King of heaven and of earth and of the lower regions, unquote. That is an exact word-for-word description of Osiris. Quote, so that if it were possible that the angels might err in the faith or might think contrary to the faith, they could be judged and excommunicated by the Pope, unquote. Quote, the Pope is, as it were, God on earth, sole sovereign of the faithful of Christ, chief King of kings, having plenitude of power, to whom has been entrusted by the omnipotent God direction, not only of the earthly but also of the heavenly kingdom, unquote. If that's not blasphemy according to the definition, then I don't know what is, folks. Quote, the Pope can modify divine law, and since his power is not of man but of God, unquote. The Pope can modify divine law? Well, you see that he did. He changed the day of rest, dictated by God, from the seventh day to the first day, and he changed the Ten Commandments to allow the worship of idols. Some of the Catholic popes in the past have commented on the major changes coming in the future. One such pope was Pope Pius XI, who wrote the following in 1937. Communism has behind it occult forces for which a long time have been working for the overthrow of the Christian social order, unquote. One of the popes who preceded him, Pope Pius Pope Pius IX, wrote this in November 1846 about the changes that he saw in the future. Quote, that infamous doctrine of so-called communism is absolutely contrary to the natural law itself, and if once adopted, would utterly destroy the rights, property, and possessions of all men, and even society itself, unquote. Now, don't get all worked up about what the Pope says, because they have succeeded now with this Pope in putting one of their own upon the throne of the Vatican. It had long been their dream, and now it is true. And the bans have been lifted against Catholics joining secret societies. And many of the hierarchy of the Vatican belong to the secret societies, the Freemasons, Propaganda 2, etc., etc., etc. You will find an obelisk, the symbol of the phallus, the penis of Osiris, in the Vatican courtyard. If you don't believe me, go look.
The Holy Grail in the mysteries has nothing to do with the cup that Jesus drank out of at the Last Supper. The Holy Grail in the mysteries, in fact, represents the bloodline of the house of David. Those believed by the mysteries to have the divine right to rule. I've said this many, many times before. I will say it again. Whoever rules the world in the New World Order will lay claim to the ancestry of the house of David. All throughout the history of all the religions, there is the rock that was present at the foundation of the world. Upon this rock I build my church. Under the throne of the Queen of England there is a rock. And until you understand it and stop being manipulated by it, you will always be one of the innocent victims in this battle. For you are not part of the power structure, and you are of no consequence to any of these people on either side. They care not whether you live or die or what your suffering is. They only care that they mount the throne of power. That they destroy all existing nations, all existing religions, and create a one-world totalitarian socialist government which they will rule. To you it is known as the beast. The number of the beast is 666, which represents all those initiates who have gone through the 3 degrees and 6 acts. The 3 degrees of the mysteries, the mystery religion of Babylon. The wars between the Vatican, between Scarlet, and between the beast. And they all agree that there will be a one-world government. The only point of contention is who will sit upon the throne of the world. If you want to play their game and buy into their deceptions and help them achieve this, you will always be their slave, no matter what side you are on and no matter who is the victor. And you will make their shoes, and you will plow their fields, and you will play their football games for their amusement. And you will keep your mouth shut on certain subjects. And you will do as you are told. Or you will just very simply, ladies and gentlemen, cease to exist. The brainwashing of your children has been going on for quite some time. Right under your nose, and you don't even know it. And it's about time you learned it, and it's about time you do something about it. And understand this, the brainwashing is strong. It is strong. And it plays on the emotions. And it feels good. It is such a great deception that even the elect shall be deceived. Don't fall for it. And they form a union. They come together. Of course, the little Jewish lemur represents the Kabbalah influence on the mysteries. The young lion king represents the full body of initiates. He is the child Horus. And the warthog represents all those who do not feel any allegiance or loyalty to any other body, who have joined this union, hoping that in the end they will be vindicated and will have their place in the sun. In the sun. And they wander about in the wilderness, seeking the promised land. Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is really something. And of course, they are persecuted and attacked. And the young lion fights off the attackers and protects the other two. This traditionally has been the kingdom of England, Great Britain, which is represented by a lion. This outcast trio represents British Israelism. The Queen of England is called by the mysteries the Queen of Babylon, and it's about time you knew that also. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, none of this British Israelism stuff ever surfaced in the entire history of the world until King Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife and found out that the Pope would not let him. So King Henry VIII divorced all of England and himself from the Catholic Church, from the Pope, founded the Anglican Church, and then it became necessary to justify his actions to the world, to the English people in specific, and to be able to make it stick. Somewhere down the line, the Royal House of England invented a family tree connecting them directly by descendants to the Royal House of David, and thus to the Old Testament, the lineage of the divine right to rule, or so they claim. Because if you've studied the history of the Middle East, you know that the state of Israel was not that ruled, ladies and gentlemen, by the house of David. The house of David was of the tribe of Judah. The house of David and the tribe of Judah warred against and conquered the state of Israel. That's the true history of the region. Yet these people claim that they have the divine right to rule, and they are superior race to all of the people because they are descended from the house of David and the original Hebrew race from the state of Israel, the ancient country of Israel, which wasn't a country that encompassed all of the 10 tribes of Israel. There were several small countries, the most powerful of which emerged as the tribe and the country of Judah and conquered all the rest under the house of David. Don't believe it? Look it up. The common man has never been told the truth throughout the history of the world, except by a very few people. And when those very few people told the common man the truth, they generally did not ever believe them, choosing instead to believe the lies. I find it absolutely amazing, for the truth, elusive though it may be, can be found by anyone who wants to take the time to look for it. King George VI had his genealogical chart traced back to King David, and he educated his daughters in British Israelism, including his heir, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Now, who are you going to believe, folks? For I tell you that everyone who believes in this scam of British Israelism or Christian identity is, in effect, and in reality, calling Jesus Christ a liar. If you don't believe that, listen to their version of the world's history, and then go read the words in red in your Bible. Jesus said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." He didn't say, "Suffer the little white children to come unto me." He did not say, "Suffer the little Anglo-Saxon Aryan children to come unto me." He did not say, "Suffer the little black children to come unto me," or the little red children, or the little yellow children. He said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." He said, "Whosoever believeth in me shall have everlasting life."
Foremost among those who were called to lead the church from the darkness of popery into the light of a purer faith stood Martin Luther. And this is what people believe, but Martin Luther himself was an initiate of the mystery schools, a follower of the faith of Mystery Babylon, as was the Pope and the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. You see, but they were vying for rulership of the world, and up until not too long ago, have always been throughout history. For the Vatican practices the corrupted worship of Mystery Babylon, the combination of Christianity and the worship of Mystery Babylon, whereas the mystery schools retain the pure form of Mystery Babylon. And this is the only difference between the two, folks, and they have been vying throughout history for the rulership of the world. Mystery Babylon attempting to destroy the Pope and Christianity, and the Pope attempting to persecute and burn away the followers, the initiates of Mystery Babylon. And it has always been the goal of the worshippers of Mystery Babylon to seat one of their own upon the throne of the Vatican. And they have succeeded. They have succeeded, folks, and now you are seeing the beginning of the combination of all religions into one world religion.
Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. If I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States.
President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting.
I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve. Do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old, I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies, and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flame.
The President of the United States is racist.
If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions, just let those run wild. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. I would caution against extreme hard work in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.